Okay, hello.
Hello, welcome to our first ever podcast at the Osaka Makerspace.
Yes, podcast, not pogcast.
I said podcast.
Okay. Just
It's not
checking.
pog.
Well, I liked Pog when Pog was a thing. Did you like
Yeah.
Pog?
Meh.
Yeah, well.
I don't
Welcome to the Osaka Makerspace and our first podcast. And we're going to talk about all kinds of crazy stuff, maker stuff, nerdy stuff.
Yeah, mainly that stuff. Making stuff and being nerdy about stuff. That's
Yeah.
basically what we do.
That's right.
And that's what we want to do anyway.
That's what we're looking for. Okay, so top of the list,
All right.
maker news.
Maker news.
Yes.
Okay.
Have you seen any interesting projects lately, or seen any like new technologies that make making things simpler, more interesting?
Well, when we first started the Makerspace, it was my first introduction to 3D printing, and I've been working with like 3D printing and CNCs, and I haven't quite learned everything I need to learn about them. But the one interesting project we've seen that I'd really like to do is the box joint jig for a table saw.
Oh yes, with like the dovetail, or not dovetail, but finger joints.
Finger joints, yeah.
Yes.
So finger joints and box joints are the same thing.
Okay.
And basically they're square kind of teeth. They're called fingers, and they interlock on the corner.
Right.
And I tried a little while ago making an old-fashioned jig, which you kind of make a cut and then you make a dowel that's exactly the same width as your the finger that you want to make. Right. And it turns out it's actually quite finicky to do it. And I was trying to make really, really small fingers, exactly the same as the kerf on the blade, so the width of the cut.
Right.
And this particular blade is 2.2 millimeters.
Yeah.
And so each finger would be 2.2 millimeters, but I couldn't get accurate enough.
Yeah.
So if you had, because the old-fashioned jigs index each finger off the last finger you cut, if it's like 0.1 millimeter off,
Right.
the first joint, okay, that's maybe 0.1 millimeters, not a big deal. Second joint's 0.2, and then when you get down to your fifth finger on there, you're already a millimeter off, which is about half a finger.
Right.
And you see the fingers starting to kind of bend and kind of be cookie, kind of trying to line up properly.
Yeah.
It just doesn't work.
Yeah.
And I'm very sad about that. But if it can get a computer to kind of generate sort of a step movement and maybe do the math and mathematically work out the width of your joints, it can theoretically cut any width joint you want.
Right, and that's basically what this project that we saw was doing, right? You have your table saw set up, and then you have like on a gantry of some sort, you have like the piece of wood that's clamped down, and it's moving left and right, and I suppose even forward and back, because it's got
to go forward and back.
Right, it's got to go forward and back as well, because then you have your table saw blade here. And so as the table saw is spinning, it will move it forward and cut out a bit and move it back, and then over the correct amount, and then back forward again so that it cuts it back out. And it does that until you have like the appropriate amount cut out for each finger.
Right, and that's a really exciting project, because recently I was thinking about doing this little these boxes for weddings, and they're supposed to look like treasure chests.
Right.
Now, my first design actually just you router out a groove for the sides, and it just gets glued together, and then you clamp it together with the metal bands and maybe some studs or some rivets or something like that. But it'd be much classier if it had some really cool kind of joinery on the corners that the people can see. It would be a much classier kind of treasure chest. It'd be like a treasure chest, or even a jewelry box style treasure chest. It'd be quite nice. You could do it in good wood, and maybe if it can work it out with the computer, working out kind of an automated joining system, it would be quick, easy, and well, maybe easy, hopefully easy, and accurate, and that's hopefully accurate within, say, 1/100th of a millimeter or something like that.
Right.
And there's some modifications have to do with the table saw as well.
Right.
Because this table saw is a contractor saw.
Yeah.
It's meant to be picked up and moved to like a site that you're building a house on or something like that. So the blade itself is a little wobbly, which is inaccurate, and then which adds some inaccuracy to it. And then there's no zero tolerance insert, which means it's kind of bumpy.
Right.
And so theoretically, if the pieces are moving around, it could theoretically kind of slip into that groove, and you get another inaccuracy, which is pain in the butt.
Right. No, a similar project that I've been thinking about making lately is like a very super mini table saw. Right? Because I've been working on these little 3D, laser etched token type things. And so I need to cut a very thin line.
Right.
And I would like them to be very straight. And so I was thinking, I've seen these online before. People use like a quadcopter, multi-rotor type engine with a tiny saw blade attached to it, and then it's basically a mini table saw. And so I was thinking of doing maybe something similar, maybe with a Dremel, right? And having the Dremel attach and secure itself very firmly and always in the same place, and then have like a little sled that I can move back and forth, and I can move my little tokens over and sled them into the spot, and that way get a very thin curve on that. Right. So I've been thinking about making one of those. Might not take too much work.
Yeah,
a few hours.
At the auction the other day, we had gotten this little itty bitty table saw, the yellow one on the top.
Yes.
And it's missing a motor. Yeah. Like when I bought it,
but we got a motor for that in the form of another. What was it? It was a rotary saw or something.
Well, this one runs off a drill. I mean, the original piece was like the only motor that was in this 3-tool set was the one that was on the drill itself, and the drill acted as a normal drill, or you could put on one of the attachments and you can use it as a planer, and the planer bit is already in there, and then you could take it off again and put it into the saw, the table saw itself. And that blade is pretty fine, but it's not
Hitachi,
as fine.
Right?
Yeah, it's Hitachi. Yeah. It's made back in the 80s, I found out.
Right.
And they don't make any of the parts anymore.
Of course not. Why would they continue to support their products beyond 30 years?
So I was thinking of just taking the motor out of one of the many drills that we had gotten at the also at the auction. Yeah, I'm not very good at auctions. Anyway, like using just one of the drills there, taking it out
so
of the
that blade, how wide is that blade? Because actually that might be just an easier way for me to go.
It's about, I don't know, but I think it's less than the regular table saw.
Like maybe a millimeter?
It's about a millimeter.
That's not too bad. I might just do that. Save some time.
But there's another project that you could actually do that might be interesting. I made chainmail, of course, right? And when you're cutting rings by hand, it's actually pretty tedious. You're using like a shear cutters, and you're kind of one ring, 2 rings, 3 rings. Well, non-ferrous materials like copper or bronze or even aluminum, it's actually much you get a much nicer cut with a saw blade. And people, you can do it by hand with a jeweler saw, which is also kind of tedious. Or some people have figured out kind of a cutting table, not really a table saw, but it has sort of a tube on it to fit your coil down into, and as it comes through, it just cuts off only one side. And it usually runs off a really high-end Dremel type tool. But maybe it could work with our Dremel.
Well, or my Proxen, maybe it's
Maybe your Proxen?
fairly good Dremel-esque tool,
Well,
rotary tool as they're called.
I think the Proxens are actually really good tools, but yours is a little bit.
Yes, I got it on sale.
Yeah, it's a little bit lower powered than
it was on sale.
Well, if you're comparing my Dremel to your Proxen, my Dremel's a bit more.
That's probably true. It's probably
beefier.
Yeah.
But I probably spent twice as much on it.
How much did you spend?
I think it goes for about Neiman N.
Okay, so you're close to spending 3 times as much as what I've spent on my Proxen.
Okay.
My Proxen was on sale, and I think I got it for about 6,000 to 7,000.
I thought it was about.
Typically,
10,000 yen.
Typically it would be about 10,000 yen.
I thought it was 10,000, so I was thinking double. But
because of the sale.
But of course, that also includes a few of the little extensions and gadgets.
Right.
It's kind of.
I did see the larger size when I was shopping. It was also on sale, but it's just it is beefier, right? And so when you're holding it in your hand, I thought that's just a little more than I want to hold. So.
It's not like a pencil or something.
Right. So this one's kind of in between, half pencil. Half beef. I like it, but it's not the best.
Of course, the Dremel one has the little tube connection. I see you used it the other day.
We used it the other day with when Mike came in and he was working on his guitar and he wanted to kind of drill a hole between one of the like the knob cavities and one of the pickup cavities so that he could run a wire through there, and so. We were looking at different ways of drilling this hole without destroying the body of the guitar.
I'm sure those are technical terms. The knob cavity.
Yes. Well, where the potentiometers go.
Okay.
Yes.
Potentiometer hole.
The pickup is the technical term.
Pickup hole.
The hole for it's more of a cavity than a hole. It doesn't go all the way through. But yes. So that's what we use that for. It was quite useful.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah. I was actually going to set it up to do my horn carving, which is why I got all those like that little set of steel. I guess they're for stone, but they're steel carving tools, and so
maybe I'm not familiar that you got
those. They're just Dremel, Dremel bits. But,
okay. The stone ones.
Yeah, the stone ones.
Okay.
I got a set of like 12 of them or something.
Yeah, the little abrasive pink stones.
Well, no, I got that too.
Okay.
But there's also the other one. They're just steel bits. And I was thinking, they all look like they have little balls at the end that spin around.
Right.
It's kind of abrasive.
Yep.
And I was going to use those for carving the horns.
Yep.
Which I've got one design finished on it, and I was trying an experiment with the second one with the copper.
Right. So I know yesterday you were working on one of your little horns there, and you coated everything in the epoxy.
Yeah, that was a disaster.
Oh, that's too bad.
No, I mean it's still okay. When I took it off, It's stuck.
There it is up there.
Yeah, it's up there. It's up there. So that takes 36 hours and to properly cure, so a day and a half.
Yeah.
And so I started to, for example, to take it off, and right now it's not fully solid. It's a bit kind of gummy, like.
Okay.
So I had taken it off because to the touch it's dry.
Right.
And I just put it out of the way so we could have the table again.
Right.
But I think it's going to be fine.
Okay.
Once it dries, I'm going to consider putting on a second coat.
Yeah, and you could always maybe sand it a little bit and then just paint it on a little bit more on like the rim.
But more to the point, I think actually, like when you're working with epoxy, you're going to have to buff it up. You're going to have to buff it. You're going to have to.
I suppose if you want it super shiny.
Yes. Well, it was super shiny and like it went on a pretty even coat, but you can still kind of see kind of a
little wave.
A little wave to it. So I think you're just going to have to do the proper kind of polishing method, which is rough grit sandpaper, fine grit sandpaper, finer grit sandpaper, super fine, and then all the way up to crazy.
I've noticed that some of the finer grit sandpaper we have tends to leave black coloring behind as we use it.
Yeah, I had bought...
Am I doing something wrong?
No, well, no. There's several different kinds of sandpaper, and
this is not the aluminum oxide, right? That's the stuff that looks white when you first start working with it, and then it often looks maybe a purplish or pink or red type of color.
Turns funky colors after
Right, right.
No, this one is superfine 2000 grit, wet dry polishing paper.
Right.
And most likely that type is actually supposed to be used for something like polishing up your chisels or something like that. And that's what I bought it for.
Okay.
And it should work just fine with wood, but it seems to kind of
get into the grains.
It gets into the grains a little bit.
Perhaps if I sanded more properly with lower grits before moving on to this super high grit, it wouldn't quite get in as much.
That might be true, but sanding is probably the most hated thing in woodworking.
Yeah.
Because you start sanding and you go, I don't know when to stop.
Yes. Well, I'm sure somebody out there knows when to stop, and you should probably Google that.
But anyway,
we should probably Google that.
The point is, you get to kind of an even consistency with that grit, and you kind of have to judge it by feel more than anything.
Right.
You're like, oh, it's a little rough over here. Keep sanding. Okay, it's a little rough. And when you're at really, really low grits, like 40 grit or 60 grit or something, it's grinding level.
Right.
It changes the dimensions of the wood that you're working on.
Right.
So that could actually ruin your project. And probably the counter we made the other day, that's probably what we did. We sanded off too much on one side and changed, knocked off, probably chipped off or knocked off a millimeter here and there, which was only embarrassing because it was at the joint between the two pieces of our table. If it was in the middle of the table, no one would have noticed. But at any rate,
I still that was a project that I thought we did pretty well on, and the fact that there are a few little problems here and there, I'm not exactly sure they were all our fault. I think some of our wood was just poorly cut by factory.
Well, definitely.
And even the melamine was yes. Do not trust a factory cut on melamine, because you're gonna end up ruining the fact that you trusted that factory cut. It is not always straight.
The other thing is one of our first big commercial projects. Yes. So probably thinking about it now, I would have done it a lot differently. I would have bought the larger sheets of melamine. Right. That goes without saying. But also,
the time was a constraint, though.
Yeah, that's true. But also, I would have probably made the top and the feet two separate parts.
Yes.
And then maybe worked some kind of apparatus to
level.
I've made adjustable feet on the
right.
So they'd be sitting on the little feet, and then you could just adjust it. And maybe I would have put like a kickboard down at the bottom to cover any kind of gaps you see.
Yeah. So let me just explain something real quick to people who might be listening. Here in Japan, floors are notoriously wavy, bumpy, not level at all.
Right.
And so when you design something to be installed in a level space, and then you take it to a place that's not level, of course you're going to run into problems. And that's kind of what we ran into when we were working on this this countertop that we built. And wow, that floor was as bad as it is here. And this is one of the worst floors I've ever seen.
Well, this floor is bad, and that floor is bad, and it's compounded the problems really.
Yeah. But we didn't build it on this floor. We
put down
a layer of
very thick plywood,
and we kind of supported it so that we could make it as level as possible. Yeah.
You live and learn, I guess.
Yes, that's right. Live and learn. Keep going.
So the makerspace here, of course, we're trying to support it in different ways.
Right.
We take on projects like that mainly just to support our efforts here.
Right. So makerspaces in general are, I think, something that the people who organize, you dream of having people come in and build projects, right? And in some places that really happens well, and that's primarily what goes on at the makerspace. But here in Japan, people are not so much into DIY.
Well, they are, but they kind of want it something kind of halfway done that they kind of assemble at the end. It's kind of like when my wife Fumi and I go to ABC cooking school, and so you get a menu and you get kind of directions, But when you've come into the space to learn how to make this dish, they've already got most of the material, like the flour or whatnot, weighed out for you.
Right.
It's already there, and it's like, here's your flour, here's your baking soda, here's your whatever, making a cake or something like that.
Put them in a bowl.
Anyway, yes, basically, put them all together. When there's a course on how to make bread, and all this stuff is weighed out for you, but you still have to learn how to knead, and that's an important skill to have. So you're working on those skills. So it's not entirely useless,
right?
But it's kind of packaged really nicely.
Yes,
right. It's already put together and kind of sit down and do the important parts. Right. You don't have to kind of deal with. Am I putting too much flour or something like that in there? Right. But which is a little give and take. But I think that's what they want when they're looking at DIY spaces, or around the corner there's a DIY factory, and if you go in there and do a project, the projects are kind of already pretty well laid out for them.
Right.
There's no real. There's a bit of creativity, and there's a lot of skill learning.
Right.
But they can't just imagine something out and do it. If you do that, you can see the teachers kind of getting nervous, they're going off script. What do I do?
Right. And so as a result, we've made these projects ourselves where we can kind of here's a thing, and you just got to put it together. But at the same time, we have left more leeway, for example, if you want to make a fidget spinner or a hand spinner, as they call it in Japanese, we haven't already cut out the shape. It's just a square, and you have to design the shape that you want, right? A square of MDF, and so you have to design the shape, and you have to then drill the holes. And so we try to give that little bit of extra step so that they have to be a little more creative. And we'll see how it goes.
We're starting that.
We're starting
that to kind of do it. But originally, our original thought was just people would come in and do their own stuff. Right. That's not.
It happens sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes it happens, but for the most part, it's just too open for the average.
That's true. Creativity is honestly a problem in Japan. I think it is probably around junior high school, because elementary school students, I've noticed, are very, very creative. Very imaginative, and they like to get into trouble, but at some point, maybe I think it's junior high school,
somewhere,
it's they drum the creativity out of them.
Well, I think it's fear of making mistakes is more.
But that fear is instilled into them,
right? Yes,
by the junior high schools. So.
Well, I think it's a little bit before junior high school. I think it's probably 6th grade or something like that.
Maybe.
So
it's hard to pin down exactly when.
Right.
But at some point between being an elementary school student and being a junior high school student, people lose their creativity here.
Or they have a hard time expressing themselves, and then the time they have to express themselves again, really, really, truly free. Is probably college,
right?
Which is why, actually, in Japan, when you come and you see people in kooky outfits, whether it's Lolita outfits or maid outfits, those are generally college students. They're not high school students, because high school students, you're in the uniform
or they
phase.
Could be high school dropout students as well.
Well,
looking for work,
a little bit of that.
A little bit of that. But yes, this is tends to be when people kind of get back into creativity again, when people join rock bands and these kinds of things. So
they're definitely college activities.
Right.
Where in America, by contrast, you get into the rock band in high school. It's a high school band, high school garage band.
That's usually kind of how it goes. So we face this challenge of having people who are not terribly creative anymore.
Well, also they just don't know the maker thing at all.
That's true. Really. It's
just not so
much exposure to the maker culture yet, although it is expanding.
Yeah. Didn't you say there's some kind of...
Make does one of the maker fairs in Tokyo.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And here in Osaka, they have over at the I believe it's ATC in Cosmo Square. What's the ATC Convention Center? Sorry. They have a Maker's Bazaar, which is a type of basically maker fair.
It's often kind of more like a craft fair.
Yeah, a little bit like a craft fair, but even a maker fair is kind of like a craft fair.
Yeah. I don't really see the difference so much sometimes.
It's not so different. So
a little bit more electronics maybe.
So we do have a little bit going on in Japan as far as maker scene, but it's not quite the same as, like, I'm from Texas, right? And I grew up in the countryside, and when there's a plumbing problem, my father and I fixed the plumbing. When there was an electrical problem, we fixed the electrical problem, right? We just kind of did everything ourselves. That doesn't happen here.
Yeah.
You have a plumbing problem, you call the plumber. And they pass out lots of little magnets that fit on refrigerators and things in the mailboxes.
Call me if the water problem.
Exactly, yeah. So you're in Japan, you call a professional.
And they tend to kind of look down on people who try to do it themselves. They're kind of they could have been.
Oh, you try to do this yourself, did you?
We're going to charge you.
That explains it.
We're going to charge you double to fix what you messed up.
All the damage you caused. Yeah, well. Don't. If you're a maker, if you're a DIYer, don't call a professional. Call another maker, call another DIY guy who might know a little bit more, or Google it, check YouTube, because you can probably still fix it and not have to deal with those condescending looks that you get from the professionals.
Yeah, I was just thinking about our air
don't think about that. All right. So I kind of want to talk a little bit about an electronic project of some sort before we run out of time here, because we're running low. Let's see. So personally, I'm a big fan of Hackaday. I also like Instructables and things like this. So recently, I saw this little. They had the coin cell challenge at Hackaday,
right?
Which was a contest where you have to use coin cells to the small batteries to make some type of a project, and they had these different categories where you can make projects that last a long time, you can make ones that use an incredible amount of power as quickly as possible, things like this. And one of the projects that I believe came from that was it was a kind of derivative project based on one of the Adafruit projects that was like a no TV project.
Okay.
So the idea of this project is that you have this device and you press a button and then it sends out IR signals through infrared LEDs to turn off all the TVs around. Right?
Oh.
So like it just cycles through all of the on-off signals that a remote control would normally send out. And so if you're in like a waiting room of some sort at the airport or something, and you're like, oh my god, it's this show again, right? And you press the button and it turns off and everybody's like, what? And so somebody took this idea and they had made a little PCB for it that is slightly larger than a coin cell itself. It said that it was 1 inch in diameter, right? And so it's very small, and it was a rechargeable coin cell as well, and it's just one button and 3 little IR transmitters. So you press the button, TVs turn off. And it's a pretty nice project. It's derivative, of course.
I know that you have the programmable remote controls, and they always have the codes on the back.
Yes. And even
I figure that's probably what you have to go for.
Yeah, when I was in university, I had a Nokia that had one of the little infrared ports, and I was able to download an app for that would allow me to use it as remote control for TVs, VCRs, blah blah blah.
Would you power it with a?
Well, it was a phone.
Arduino?
Right? No, it was a phone.
Oh no, I mean like this new this.
Oh, the new project. Yes, what it uses an AT-Tiny 880. What's the name of that chip? I forgot. Anyways, it's basically it's an Atmel little microcontroller, and so what do you call them? We have those little tiny Arduino clones.
Okay, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That you plug directly in. The Spark
Digisparks?
phones. The Digispark, thank you.
Digispark.
Yeah, the Digisparks. So it uses that same processor that's on the Digispark.
Okay.
Right? So it's basically a tiny Digispark with some IR sensors. IR emitters, rather. Yeah.
And you just program it up with all the on-off.
Exactly. And so when you press a button, it just automatically goes through a list of on-off codes for all the different brands of TVs. Right.
And eventually one will be the right one for the TV.
Exactly. And so it says that in the write-up on Hackaday, it said that this project can do like it can run this program 40 times on one charge of the battery. So that's not bad, right?
That sounds fun.
If you go and there's like some TV show or some station that you just are extremely not fond of, you can press your button and then the TV goes off and you can sit in peace.
I remember going to Texas and stayed at a Holiday Inn, and I think it was a Holiday Inn or something, but Holiday Inn apparently has some association with a particular news channel.
Yes.
And apparently they have to have that particular news channel on when you're eating your breakfast in the morning.
Interesting.
So this would be a really fun project just to go in there and like every time you stay at Holiday Inn, like I don't need to see this. Beep.
Yes. Well, in that situation though, I think you're probably close enough to the TV you can just turn it off.
Well, it's behind. Usually, it's behind glass or something. Is it? So you have to do it by remote control.
Gotcha. Well, then yes, it's perfect for that.
So you go.
Yes. Airports as well, right? Airports are often the TV's kind of like in a case. It's.
But they don't want anybody stealing the TV or whatever.
Yeah, sure.
Or messing with the TV or whatever. Yeah. That
turning it off.
Bye bye.
Yeah.
Have your emergency. No more news.
Yeah.
Button.
Yeah.
That'd be nice. Breakfast in peace.
Yeah. All right. Well, we are running out of time, and you know what we forgot to do? We forgot to introduce ourselves.
Oh, okay.
This is our first podcast.
Right.
YouTube cast. So,
YouTube cast.
Yes. So my name is John. Here at the Makerspace, I am primarily in charge of. Oh, good lord! I'm primarily in charge of electronic projects and roboticized tools like the CNC and the 3D printer.
And apparently not the phones.
Not the phones. Forget about the phones for now.
All right. And my name is Ryan.
All right, I'll be right back. Keep going.
Ryan Carlson. At the Makerspace, I'm usually the craft guy. So I'm in charge of things like woodworking projects and leatherworking projects and chainmail, or teaching, learning new crafts is kind of my hobby, really. I want to try to be able to do any kind of craft someone sets in front of me. The other day we were making Viking drinking horns. That was kind of a fun project. I made a Viking drinking horn out of wood chips, which was another project. Amongst other things. A lot of fun little projects. Eventually I want to make my own suit of armor and learn a lot more about metalworking. That's kind of the direction I'm going in now. Whereas since we've opened the shop, I've done mostly woodworking. I'm in my little smock right now because I was outside cutting wood for our new sign. And I hope to show you some of the projects I've been doing. Art projects included.
Hey Ryan.
My bonsai sculpture. Yes.
Sorry to interrupt. The guys from the park who were cutting trees.
Yeah.
I think they want to give us some wood or something.
Sure.
So, yeah, we'll take it.
Yeah.
Hi.
Speaking of woodworking projects, one of the guys that kind of cut down trees in the local parks, they've kind of given us some logs, so we kind of are able to source some natural looking logs which you can not normally find in Japanese lumber yards or DIY shops or woodworking shops or your home centers.
Okay, cool.
Cool.
Okay, well that was good news.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it real quick, just
Okay.
because it's very interesting, and we're
Yeah.
very lucky, and hopefully we don't get anybody into trouble. So, wood is hard to come by in Japan, especially natural wood.
Yeah, as I just mentioned,
Without too many details, just in case we're
yeah.
not supposed to do this.
Well, like when you go to home center here in Japan, the U.S. home centers, Home Depot or whatever that is, or Lowe's, that kind of thing, you can generally find hardwoods. You can generally find woods that you might build furniture out of, as well as your house. But in Japan, no. It's mostly just woods that they would build a house with, which means
Softwood, pines.
basically a few different kinds of pine. A Japanese wood called hinoki, which is
the coniferous plants, basically.
Yeah, and then you can find sugi, which is Japanese cedar, which is very, 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 very soft.
Right. Very prone to warping.
And kind of inferior to Western cedar because cedar's not supposed to grow in such a hot environment. It's not natural here. So it grows too fast, so it grows kind of spongy. So it has that wonderful smell, and it kills moths.
Yes.
That their larvae don't like cedar.
Right. Just like cedar normally does.
Right. But it's all kind of kooky when you're trying to make
Right.
something nice out of it.
Yeah, we made a door out of it, and the door still looks pretty good, but it's a little bit crooked now, and then like some gaps kind of opened up, but not so bad though.
Not so bad.
Not
Well,
so
it's
bad.
supposed to be looking like a barn door.
Yeah, so they just called, and they were saying they're going to be cutting some wood in a park nearby, and offered us if we would like to come by tomorrow morning, they can give us some free wood.
Great.
That's wonderful.
And that way we can cut it down with our... Well, we might
With a
be able to cut it down with a bandsaw.
yeah.
But it's very, very green wood, so we have to really just let it sit and dry
Yes,
out
and dry
nicely.
for a while. That's true.
And I'm really late for my karate
Yes,
practice.
yes. Oh, yes, my God, you are. Sorry about that. But, so, yeah, maybe it may be like cherry or something, though, so it'd be really good wood.
Actually, they said they were going to be cutting some sakura, like the
Right.
Japanese cherry blossom wood,
Right.
which might be very good wood. I
Yes.
don't know how it compares to like the wild cherry
Yeah, I don't
that
know
we cut in
The U.S.
the U.S.
Yeah.
So that would be kind of interesting
Yeah,
to see.
so that's a nice little chance. I'm glad that they called. I'm sorry that it kind of interrupted everything.
Yeah, and
But,
I think
did you talk about this already?
yeah, I was just I had mentioned that I was kind of the artsy, doing lots of little art projects.
Right.
And, this is one of my recent art projects. It's not quite finished yet. I'm gonna encase the root ball kind of in maybe resin. But it's I'm kind of going through all the formalized types of bonsai, and I'm going to reproduce them with this 0.5 millimeter wire or 0.46 millimeter wire.
It turned out really well.
And this was one. I have another one up on the shelf. This is the what they call the informal style or the curve style, and that's the formal upright style,
Right.
which is kind of in the resin now, and it's not cured yet. It's my first time with resin. Hopefully, I don't mess it up. It's gonna be messed up.
It'll be fine. It'll be fine. All right. So yes, I'm John, and
Ryan.
hope to see you again soon.
Okay.
And yeah, we'll try to do this maybe once a week.
Once a week.
I think so.
Once
yeah.
a week. Once a week.
Maybe Fridays.
Maybe Fridays.
And we're free on Friday, right?
And we're gonna do more project videos where we
Yes.
kind of we're gonna try to actually go through without too much wordage. I kind of go on and on about
Yes.
things, but
I've been thinking, let's cut them into episodes, 20-minute episodes or something. Even if we, tape for an hour, chop that thing up.
I think some of it we could probably fast forward on a little bit, but
that's probably true,
depends on the project, I think. But for example, made the Game of Thrones throne. I like to make the steel Game of Thrones throne.
Oh yes, that's a big project,
and that's a huge project.
That's gonna be a big one.
That'd be like 500 hours of work.
Oh, I hope
something.
not.
But the point is that if you put that whole project into one video, nobody's going to see it. It's going to be like 8 hours.
Oh yeah, or
I'm going to watch this for 8 hours.
Only if you record like a tenth of it, it might be 8 hours.
Right. So some of that's going to have to be like, this is how you did this part.
Right. Now,
fast forward, I have 500 of them.
We've done it 500 times. Yeah. That'll be interesting. That'll be a good project.
You had to cut that out.
And I'm going to make Arduino-based cat toy pretty much as soon as Ryan leaves and we stop this. I'm going to start working on that, and that'll be fun. I may not finish it today, but I'll finish it soon, and I'll make videos of it as I go.
Yeah, our cat named Arduino.
Yes,
our cat's name is Arduino.
It's an Arduino-based cat toy for Arduino.
Arduino-chan, our little cat. We call him Ardy for short.
Yes, it's much easier.
So the basic idea is that the cat comes up, and the sensor senses him moving.
Yeah.
And the cat toy flops to the opposite.
Exactly.
And so he kind of goes chasing that way. And then there's a sensor on the other side, so it flops back the other way.
That's the plan.
That's the plan.
We'll see how it goes.
It might not work.
Yeah.
And he might just look at it and go, meh.
Yeah, poor Artie. He's fickle.
He's fickle. Well, all cats are fickle, but maybe if we put enough catnip in the little toy,
that'll probably do it. I'm sure that'll do it.
I need my fix.
Well, Artie. So yes, we realized, at least Pelag and I, we realized that if we called him Arduino all the time, he might think that we're telling him no.
Arduino?
Yeah, because we tell him no a lot.
Yeah.
Artie, no! Artie, stop! Yeah.
It's the cat language we have to learn.
He's pretty well behaved. But yeah, if we called him Arduino all the time, it might confuse him. So, Artie's a good nickname.
Yeah. He's still a little bitey.
A little bit. Not too bad.
Not too bad.
Yeah.
I have to tell him no. I go, boop.
Yeah. He's still young. He's 8 months or so.
Right. Fumi marked on our calendar that his arrival day, not his birthday, because we don't know when that was. Yeah. But
well, we arbitrarily decided that May 1st was close enough.
April 1st.
Well, we decided May 1st, but Fumi's like, no, April 14th. Like, nobody knows! Oh, well. Alright, so that's it for today. We gotta be going. Ryan's gotta get off to his karate practice, and I have some projects to start working on. But, nice to see you. Come back again. We will be back next time.
More interesting stuff to follow.
That's right. Alright.
Go make something.
See you next time.
See ya.